Here are 5 historical survival stories where people ate each other to stay alive. You're part of the Donner Party, and it's the winter of 184 647 inches the Sierra Nevada mountains. You're trapped. Snow is piling up faster than you've ever seen, 20 feet deep in some places. Your wagon train left Missouri months ago, heading for California and a new life. Then you made a mistake. You took a shortcut. The Hastings Cutoff, they called it, promising to save time. It didn't. Instead, it added weeks to your journey and left you trapped in the mountains when winter hit early and hard. At first, you ate the oxen. Then you ate the horses. Then you ate the dogs. Then you ate leather, boiling it for hours to make it soft enough to chew. You even ate the glue between wagon boards. Then you ate tree bark and tried to digest it. Your body is consuming itself, burning muscle for fuel. Children are dying. Adults are dying. You're all dying, just at different speeds. Then someone makes the suggestion. The bodies, the people who've already died. They're frozen in the snow, perfectly preserved. The meat is right there. You can survive if you just... Nobody wants to say it out loud. Nobody wants to be the first to admit what everyone is thinking. But you're starving. Your children are starving. And the dead don't need their bodies anymore. The first person to die and be eaten was probably Bayless Williams, though the survivors never explicitly confirmed who was first. They didn't keep detailed records of whose leg they ate on which day, can't imagine why. The survivors later described cutting meat from the dead, roasting it over fires, trying not to think about whose arm this used to be. Some people refused entirely and died of starvation rather than cross that line. Others justified it. The person was already dead. They would have wanted us to survive. We're not killing anyone. But then comes the truly dark part. As more people died and were eaten, some survivors started looking at the sick and weak with a different kind of hunger. Not they might die soon and provide food, but they're going to die anyway, so why wait? There are whispered accounts never proven that some of the deaths weren't entirely natural. That perhaps someone helped them along. That perhaps the line between eating the dead and creating the dead to eat got blurred in the madness of starvation. When rescue parties finally reached the Donner Party in February 1847, they found survivors living in hovels made of snow, surrounded by dismembered bodies. Children who couldn't remember their last real meal, adults with dead eyes who'd done unspeakable things to stay alive. Of the 87 people who started the journey, only 48 survived. The rest were either buried in the snow or digested by their companion. The survivors never spoke about it in detail. Most took the specifics to their graves. But the Donner Party became American history's most infamous example of survival cannibalism, a cautionary tale about bad decisions, worse luck, and how far humans will go when the alternative is death. The shortcut that cost weeks, the early snowfall, the choice to eat the dead. Every decision made perfect sense at the time. That's the horror of it. Let's fly to the Andes Mountains in 1972, where a rugby team learns the same terrible lesson. You're on Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, a chartered flight carrying 4 or 5 people, mostly members of a rugby team and their families from Uruguay to Chile. You're young, athletic, full of life. You're discussing the upcoming match, joking with teammates. When the plane hits severe turbulence, the pilots are flying through the Andes, and they've miscalculated their position. They think they've already crossed the mountains. They haven't. The plane clips a mountain peak. The tail section tears off, sucking several people out into the void. The rest of the fuselage slides down a glacier and crashes into a remote valley at 11,800 feet elevation. Of the 45 people on board, 28 survived the initial crash. You're one of them. You're injured, surrounded by dead and dying friends, trapped in a broken airplane in one of the most remote locations on Earth. The first few days, you survive on the small amount of food from the plane, some wine, chocolate bars, a few snacks. Then it runs out. You have nothing. The search planes fly overhead, but they can't see the white fuselage against the white snow. After 8 days, you hear on the plane's radio that they've called off the search. The world thinks you're dead. No one is coming to save you. Someone suggested, the bodies. There are bodies preserved in the snow. Your friends, your teammates, people you've known your whole life. The horror is different from the Donner Party. Those were strangers thrown together by circumstance. These are your brothers, your cousins, your childhood friends. But the alternative is dying together in the snow. So you make the decision. You start with the bodies of people you didn't know as well. You try to rationalize it. They're already gone. They'd want you to survive. This is just meat now, not a person. You use glass from the airplane windows to cut strips of flesh. You dry it in the sun because cooking it seems somehow worse, more deliberate. You try not to think about whose body you're eating. Some people volunteer their own bodies if they die, making pacts. If I don't make it, you can eat me. It's the only gift left to give. 72 days. You survive for 72 days on human flesh before 2 members of your group hike for 10 days through the Andes and finally reach civilization. Rescue helicopters arrive. The world learns what you did to survive. Some people call you heroes. Others call you monsters. The survivors write a book called Alive, which becomes a movie. You spend the rest of your life explaining that you're not a cannibal, you're a survivor. There's a difference. Cannibals kill to eat. You ate to avoid dying. The Catholic Church eventually issued a statement saying your actions were morally acceptable given the circumstances. The Pope basically said, yeah, that's fine. God understands. Which is probably the most cursed papal blessing in history. The survivors went on to live relatively normal lives, though they reportedly can't eat certain meats anymore without flashbacks. The human mind is funny, that way you can survive the unsurvivable, but you can never eat prosciutto again. Now let's sail back to 1820 for a whaling disaster that inspired Moby Dick and became nautical horror legend. You're a crew member on the Essex, a whaling ship from Nantucket. It's the 20th of November, 1820, and you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean when something impossible happens. A massive sperm whale, roughly 85 feet long, rams your ship. Deliberately. It hits you once, circles around, and hits you again. The whale stove in the ship's hull like it was made of paper. The Essex is sinking, and you're 2,000 miles from the nearest land. You and the surviving crew, 20 men, escape in 3 small whaling boats. You have limited supplies, some bread, water, and navigational equipment. The captain makes a decision that will haunt the survivors forever. You could sail west to the Marquesas Islands, it's closer, but the islands are rumored to have cannibals. Or you could sail east toward South America much farther, but civilized. The crew votes. You choose to sail away from the cannibal islands. The irony will become clear later. Weeks pass. The bread runs out. The water runs out. You try to catch fish, you can't. You resort to drinking your own urine, then you stop producing urine because you're too dehydrated. Men start dying, and then comes a decision. One of the crew members dies, Owen Coffin is his name. You draw straws to see who will eat him. Then you draw straws again to see who will kill and butcher him. This is organized cannibalism with a lottery system. Very civilized. But it gets darker. When the bodies of the dead run out and men are still dying of starvation, someone suggests a new lottery. Not for who gets eaten after they die, for who gets killed to provide food. You're basically playing Russian roulette with cannibalism. The shortest straw gets shot and eaten. The captain's young cousin, Owen Coffin, draws the short straw. The captain begs to take his place. The boy refuses. He accepts his fate with dignity that no one 7-year-old should have to possess. His friend, Charles Ramsdell, draws the straw to be the executioner. Ramsdell shoots Coffin in the head and the crew eats him. This happens multiple times. Men drawing straws to see who dies so others can eat. It's survival, but it's also murder with extra steps. When rescue finally comes, only 8 of the original 20 men are still alive. Some of them are found with human bones in their boats, still gnawing on them. The survivors are rescued by different ships at different times, and their stories corroborate each other's testimony, confirming the horror. The account of the Essex disaster became famous. A young writer named Herman Melville read about it and thought, what if I wrote this story, but from the whale's perspective? And thus, Moby Dick was born the tale of a vengeful whale taking down a ship. Except in the real story, the horror wasn't the whale attack. The horror was the 90 days afterward, when civilized men with a lottery system ate each other in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You sailed away from cannibal islands only to become cannibals yourselves. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so horrifying. Let's move to World War II Leningrad for industrial-scale survival cannibalism. You're a citizen of Leningrad, modern-day St. Petersburg, and it's 1941. Nazi Germany has surrounded your city in a siege that will last 872 days, almost 2.5 years. No food is coming in, no supplies, no help. The German plan is simple. Starve the city into submission. Let the Russians eat each other. The first winter, people eat the pets. Cats and dogs disappear from the streets. Then they eat the rats. Then the pigeons. Then the crows. Then they eat wallpaper paste because it contains wheat. They eat leather belts, boiled for hours. They eat furniture, glue. They eat dirt, hoping it might contain nutrients. The daily bread ration drops to 125 grams, about 4 slices of bread that's been bulked up with sawdust and cellulose. That's your entire daily food allowance. People are dying at a rate of 100,000 per month. Then the cannibalism starts. First, it's people eating the dead. There are frozen corpses everywhere lying in the streets, stacked in buildings, buried in snow. The police find butchered bodies with the meat carved off, missing limbs, organs removed. At first, they investigate these as murders. Then they realize most of these people died of starvation first, then were butchered after death. It's technically not murder. It's just extremely disturbing. The NKVD Soviet secret police create special divisions to deal with the cannibalism epidemic. They arrest over 2,000 people for cannibalism-related crimes during the siege. They categorize it into 2 types. Type A, eating the dead, and Type B, killing to eat. Type A gets you prison time, Type B gets you executed. The fact that they needed categories and a bureaucratic system for cannibalism tells you how widespread it became. The true horror is the meat market that develops. People start trading human flesh like any other black market commodity. There are butcher shops underground, hidden where you can buy meat of suspicious origin. No one asks what animal it came from. Everyone knows. No one says it out loud. Parents keep their children inside, not just because of the bombing, but because children might disappear and end up on someone's table. The worst stories, the ones Soviet authorities tried to suppress, involve parents. Parents eating dead children. Parents killing their children to feed other children. Parents who have to choose which child to save by sacrificing another. The psychological horror exceeds the physical horror. You survive the siege, but you live the rest of your life knowing what you did, what you ate, what choices you made. When the siege finally ends in 1944, over 1 million people are dead, some from bombs, most from starvation. The survivors never talk about it. Soviet authorities classify the details. The cannibalism becomes a dark secret, a shame too deep to acknowledge. Leningrad was supposed to be a heroic resistance, not a city of desperate people eating each other. The official narrative is bravery and sacrifice, not survival, cannibalism, and meat markets. Finally, let's voyage to 1884 for a legal case that defines survival cannibalism in British law. You're Tom Dudley, captain of the yacht Mignonette, and you're stranded in a lifeboat in the South Atlantic with 3 crew members. Your ship sank in a storm. You've been adrift for 3 weeks. You have no food, no water except rainwater you occasionally catch. Everyone is dying of starvation and dehydration. You're all gonna die unless something changes. The 4 of you are: you, the captain; Edwin Stephens, the mate; Edmund Brooks, a seaman; and Richard Parker, the 7-year-old cabin boy. Parker made the mistake of drinking seawater, and now he's dying faster than the rest of you. He's unconscious, delirious, probably won't last another day. The 3 of you discuss the situation. Someone has to die so the others can survive. Parker is dying anyway. Why should all 4 of you die when 3 could survive by eating the 4th? You make a plan. You tell Parker, who's barely conscious, that you're going to kill him. You want to give him a chance to pray, to make peace. Then you take a penknife and stab him in the throat. He dies quickly. You immediately drink his blood. You're desperately dehydrated. Then you butcher his body and divide the meat among the 3 survivors. You eat Parker for 4 days before a German ship spots your lifeboat and rescues you. Here's where it gets interesting. Most survival cannibalism stories end with rescue and quiet shame. Not this one. You're British sailors, and you're honest men. So when you reach England, you tell the authorities exactly what happened. You expect understanding. You expect to be recognized as survivors who made a terrible but necessary choice. Instead, you're arrested and charged with murder. The trial becomes a landmark case. R.V. Dudley and Stephens. The question before the court: is it murder if you kill someone to survive? Your defense argues necessity. Parker was dying anyway. The three of you would have died without food. This was survival, not murder. The prosecution argues that murder is murder, regardless of circumstances, and you can't choose to kill an innocent person to save yourself. The court sides with the prosecution. You're convicted of murder. The verdict establishes a legal principle that stands to this day in British law. Necessity is not a defense for murder. You cannot kill an innocent person to save your own life, no matter how dire the circumstances. Legally speaking, you should have waited for Parker to die naturally, or drawn lots fairly, or all died together. Killing him to eat him was murder. But here's the dark comedy of British justice. You're sentenced to death, then immediately pardoned, and your sentence commuted to 6 months in prison. The law says you're murderers, but society kind of understands. So you serve half a year and go free. You spend the rest of your life known as that guy who ate the cabin boy, which is not a great reputation to have. Edmund Brooks, the one crew member who objected to killing Parker but still ate him afterward, avoids conviction by testifying against you. So he gets the moral high ground of, I didn't kill him, I just ate him, which is a hell of a distinction to make. Richard Parker's descendants were reportedly not thrilled about any of this. The case becomes required reading in law schools. Future lawyers study the cabin boy case and debate whether you're a murderer or a survivor or both. Your name becomes synonymous with survival, cannibalism, and the legal limits of necessity. So there you have it. 5 times people ate each other to survive. A wagon train trapped in snow, eating their friends. A rugby team crashed in mountains, eating their teammates. Whalers drawing straws to decide who gets killed and eaten. A besieged city with underground meat markets. And sailors who killed the cabin boy and got convicted of murder despite obviously being desperate. The common thread is desperation beyond imagination. These people didn't want to eat human flesh. They weren't monsters. They were normal people in abnormal circumstances, pushed past every moral boundary by the simple biological imperative to not die. Starvation does things to your brain. After a few weeks without food, the person next to you stops looking like a person and starts looking like meat. Your morality doesn't disappear, it just gets overridden by the screaming biological need to survive. The disturbing part isn't that they ate people. The disturbing part is that you would too. Given the same circumstances, the same starvation, the same choice between eating a corpse and dying yourself, most people would eat. We'd like to think we wouldn't. We'd like to believe we'd die with our morals intact. But survival instinct is older and stronger than morality. Your body doesn't care about ethics when it's consuming itself for fuel. Which story disturbed you the most? The Donner Party's mountain horror, the cabin boy murder? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you very much for watching. My name is Dr. Hollowstone, and I am really smart. Until next time, farewell.